In this video, we will be looking at our solar system. The first question that we're going to address is, how did our solar system form? How did we start with a sun at the center and end up with our 8 planets that are orbiting the sun? So first of all, it wasn't until about 4.6 billion years ago that our solar system began to look like it does today, with a star at the center surrounded by planets orbiting that star. To explain how our solar system formed, we're going to look at something called the Nebular Theory, which is the idea that the sun and the planets form from a rotating disk of dust and gas. And you can see from the diagram here on the right, we started from a nebula, it began to rotate, and then ultimately the sun formed at the center, and the planets formed in rings around the sun. So the nebula is that cloud of dust and gas in space. They're usually about 92% hydrogen, 7% helium, and 1% other materials. And we're going to come back and talk about hydrogen and helium when we talk about nuclear fusion, which is where the sun gets its energy. All right, so any two objects in space are going to attract each other if they have mass, and this is called gravitational attraction. And the way it works, the more mass a body in space has, the stronger its force of gravity. So because the sun has the greatest mass in our solar system, everything else is attracted to the sun. All right, so originally when this nebula existed in space, a nearby exploding star released energy that caused this nebula to start to spin. That spinning disk of dust and gas is called an accretion disk. So we formed this accretion disk around the sun, and it started to look like the second stage of formation. The next thing that happened, any solid bits of matter that were in this accretion disk started to collide and clump together through a process called accretion. And you can see as we go through the stages in this diagram, these rings become clearer and more pronounced until ultimately all the matter clumped together into the planets. So the first little bodies that form by that colliding matter are called planetesimals. They're small, they're irregular shaped, and then as smaller planetesimals collide and form, ultimately they become protoplanets. The prefix proto means first, so this is our first stage in planet formation. Eventually, enough matter or mass causes these planets to become large enough to have their own gravitational field. When they have their own gravitational field, even more matter collides and clumps to form larger and larger planets. After we had these protoplanets, the sun initiated nuclear fusion, which is where that hydrogen is being converted into helium that releases mass amounts of energy and radiation. So the solar wind from the sun and the radiation swept out the remaining gaseous material from that nebular disk. So we went from something that looked like this to something that was a little bit more organized like this. All right, so our inner planets are 4 planets closest to the sun. When nuclear fusion began, they became heated and melted and lost their original atmospheres. Our 4 inner planets are Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. These terrestrial planets are mainly solid material. They're small compared to the other planets, and they are the 4 that are closest to the sun. Our outer planets, which we call the Jovian planets or gas giants, because they maintained their atmosphere. They're much larger, greater masses, so the solar wind did not remove those atmospheres. They do have similar composition to the sun, so they're made mainly of hydrogen with helium and a few other elements. And these are Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. And that is it for our video on the solar system.